What did you think of Joe Biden's performance during last night's town hall?
I think, and I think a lot of others I heard say the same thing. It was just refreshing. We have been through 4 years of chaos and vitriol and over the top rhetoric, and to have someone running for president who's your blood pressure goes down when you watch him and not up. He's calming. He actually was very engaged on policy specifics. He stayed afterwards to talk to people who hadn't had a chance to get their question answered. I mean, all I could think of is, my gosh, 4 years of that kind of leadership is so badly needed in this country. And so I thought it was really refreshing. I'll be honest, I went back and forth. I kept switching the channel. I guess as a lot of people did that. And the contrast couldn't have been more clear. I mean, the Trump interview was off the charts. You go to Biden, you calm down. I mean, it really was a real contrast. And my hope is it becomes a contrast between the last 4 years and the next 4 years. The last 4 years were like that crazy Donald Trump interview. And my hope is, with Ohio turning blue, the next 4 years will be what we saw in the Biden interview: substance, leadership, a grown-up who wants to bring people together. Boy, would that be great for this country.
Were you pleased with the former vice president's response to court packing? Because a lot of conservatives have been trying to get answers from Biden on court packing and if he will do that.
I think he did it right. I mean, I think that the first thing I would do if I were him, and I heard, I don't know if I saw all of his answer, but the court packing is taking place right now. And I think that needs to be clarified. What has happened with Merrick Garland, what is happening while people are voting by the millions, they're rushing this person through. She didn't answer any questions. This is the court packing. And what Joe Biden is saying is, well, I will have to make up my mind on how to approach what I do when I see if this current court packing effort is successful. And I think that's the right approach, because I do think what they've done in the last couple of years is so unseemly with basically blocking Obama. It's not just at the Supreme Court level. It's at the appellate court level. They've been blocking Obama appointments. They did it for the final year or more. And then they rushed through Republican appointments once Trump was president. So it's been it not just the Supreme Court level, but here in Ohio, the Sixth Circuit level. They've been packing the courts at all levels. And I think for Joe Biden to say, and by the way, let's be clear, Joe Biden has been very clear earlier that generally I don't think he would have ever think of court packing. He would never think of doing what's being talked about. But I think to say, let's see what happens here. And if they succeed in what is clearly a very inappropriate set of actions over 4 years with courts, I think saying I may react differently depending on what happens. I mean, I think that's actually a fine thing for him to have said. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that we make it clear the court packing is taking place as we speak at multiple levels. I actually think I heard what I wanted to hear. I mean, I will say I actually thought he was even more substantive than I would have predicted. I mean, he was getting to very specific issues around tax policy and climate change and other issues that I think really matter to people. And I had not heard that in many of his debates before, but he really got into specifics. And that's kind of some of the benefit of a town hall style, frankly, where they weren't debating, was that it's not just a back and forth. It gives time to explore things. And I actually thought he did very well. The Republican Party tries to create this impression that he just can't keep up, or, and Trump calls him names. I think that town hall made it very clear he's up to speed on specifics on all sorts of issues, be it foreign policy, be it climate change, be it tax policy. I thought he was actually quite impressive. The Republicans play this game of, they continue to lower expectations on Biden, like as if he can't complete a sentence. He actually was completing paragraphs with specific policies that would lift us. So I thought that was actually even better than I would have thought. And I think the format helped go to that, because for the most part, we've been watching debates. I will say, I mean, I was disappointed that it was set up in a way that they were at the same time. I will say on the Trump forum, I thought Savannah Guthrie actually was very good. She did a good job. But it was too bad that America had to go back between stations like I had to do. I guess some people could have taped it or DVR'd it, but people should have gotten to see both those without having to choose, because I think people, especially if you're undecided, you want to see both. But so it was too bad that happened. But I actually think the format of the town hall allowed Joe Biden to show empathy towards questioners, to be a listener, to show that he actually wanted to hear from everyone afterwards, and that he was actually very up on it when it came to the substance. So I actually thought it was a home run, to be honest. And I also think that the interaction he has with real people is so different from Donald Trump. I think it shows that this is just a decent, hardworking person. I mean, it's just, he's the kind of guy, if you knew him in other ways besides being president, you'd like him. And I think that comes across in the town hall discussion. I mean, we saw with the debate in Cleveland, he's willing to be tough, but if he's interacting with everyday people who aren't lying to him like Trump was, he's also a very kind person, a very empathetic person. And at this moment in time, I think people are actually looking for that.
What do you think needs to happen in order for Joe Biden to win Ohio?
I think the Biden campaign has to really go for it. I think you got to really work Ohio all across the state. And I'm really glad in the last couple of weeks, you've seen a real stepped up activity from the Biden campaign. You've seen a statewide television. You've seen a lot of get out the vote effort. You saw a visit from the president, both in your neck of the woods in Toledo and down here in Cincinnati. We would have had Kamala Harris here, but for this staffer or two testing positive. My hope is she'll be back. So I think they see it in play, and I think they're going for it. And you only win Ohio if you really go for it. It's been interesting because on the other side, Trump has stopped running ads here, mainly because I think he's out of money. He knows he has to win here. He knows it's tied. But I think that Trump, he's a little bit of trouble because he's so low on cash. We'll see what happens. But I think to win Ohio Democrat, let's be clear, this is a tough state. You got to do everything right. And so they have to run a really smart and really aggressive 18 days. And if they do everything right, I think they can win. But it's not a state you're going to win if you don't really go for it. And so it's got to be 18 days of Joe Biden and the campaign and every volunteer in this state, every activist just really going for it. And if you do it all right, you have a chance to win.
Do you feel that there's enough enthusiasm for the Democratic nominee in the state?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we're seeing it. I think now that so one of the things that's happening is, and I think that's how we should be thinking, Donald Trump is telling the world, including America, that he may not accept the result of the election, which is something that we've never heard before. It's an incredibly disturbing thing to say. But in Ohio, our absentee ballots are received and counted and announced first. Not last, but first. A lot of other states, including swing states, are counted after the others. And that's where Donald Trump, when he says, I might not accept the outcome of the election, it's because he plans to challenge all those ballots that are still out there. Ohio's ballots will be announced already. The point is, Ohio doesn't just have the ability to end the Trump presidency, but if we're blue on election night, we can end all the drama before it starts of Donald Trump trying to undo the outcome. I think that reality is setting in with Ohio Democrats. And all of a sudden they see we have an even bigger role to play now than ever, because this threat by Donald Trump to not accept the result is a threat to our democracy. And Ohio can play a role in ending that threat, not just ending Trump, but ending that threat. And I've sensed a real energy building. And by the way, where are you seeing it? At your early vote center up there, our early vote center down here. Ballots are coming in through the roof. Now, there have been some problems with including Lucas County, with this one vendor that we're all working very hard to try and fix. It's unacceptable. But in-person voting is through the roof. So we're seeing records daily. And I think you see the enthusiasm. And I think it's because people sense, oh my gosh, Ohio can be blue. And if Ohio's blue, we've just ended it all. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of that energy build.
I heard you mention the problems with getting ballots to different counties in the state. This just came in within the time before I started shooting this interview with you. It just came out that that company that was supplying the ballots displayed a Trump 2020 flag at their headquarters in Cleveland leading up to this issue. Do you think there's a coincidence there, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know enough to know. My number one goal in the very short term is get the ballots into the hands of the voters. And I think, of course, we need to figure out if there's more to it than just a coincidence. It's disturbing, but the most disturbing thing, there are two things that have been disturbing. One, the delay itself, which of course everyone knew it was going to be high demand. I don't know why there'd be a delay with all that time to plan. But number two is this company did not respond to the Lucas County Board of Elections or other officials. We couldn't get answers out of them. It was a combination of delay and no transparency about what the heck was happening. That's been a disturbing thing from the outset. We need to get the ballots delivered, and that's my number one focus. So before I get into an investigation, I worry that anything like that might stop the ballots in their tracks. And what I'm, just so folks know, I talk to Pete Gerken every day on this because he's working on it, and obviously Marcy Kaptur is in the board. But Commissioner Gerken believes that almost all those ballots are now in the mail. And that's job number one. Job number two is to make sure that we continue to get the new ballots in the mail as they're requested. We still have 2.5 weeks. People are still putting in requests. So we've got to do all that. And then, of course, at the end of the day, there needs to be questions answered and some accountability. And if someone did anything intentional, then it's far deeper a problem. But number one right now is, and this, if you look at me on Twitter, every single day around this time, I just did it. I ask people to tell me, did you get your ballot or not? And I'm especially looking for Lucas County, Lorain County, Stark County. Those are all counties that are apparently later in line getting them. And you'll see if you look closely, more and more saying, yeah, I got mine. So it looks like they're getting out, but it's just unacceptable that almost half of the vote window has gone by and some people still have not gotten their ballots. And by the way, that's bad no matter who the voter is. But I find it especially troubling that a lot of it seems to be happening in large urban counties where it's a whole lot of Democrats who want to vote early and now have had their time cut in half. One other part of this answer, you know this because you're watching all this. We've been fighting Frank LaRose for months about the lack of drop boxes. With all these ballots coming in late, what's going to happen? More and more people are going to want to go to their drop box. Frank LaRose needs to stop being very stubborn and start being a leader. And especially in counties like Lucas County that are getting these things late, he should add other places besides the one Dropbox location to allow people to drop off their ballots, or he's going to create very long lines. So Cleveland a couple weeks ago proposed having staff go to a library and collect ballots there, watch them be delivered. I think if there are more delays in Lucas County, I think it's incumbent on Frank LaRose and the Board of Elections to say, okay, there was a delay. Let's allow people to deliver their delayed ballots before the election day, but not force them all to go to the same location where that would lead to lines. So I think it's time for some leadership they should have done it already. But now that we have these delays, it's especially important that we provide more easy ways for people to drop off their ballot once they fill it out.
The president's base says that Joe Biden should denounce radical left groups like Antifa. What is your response?
I mean, he's denounced violence from Antifa and everybody else. I think he's been explicit. Kamala Harris has been explicit. So I mean, it's needless to say, but he said it, that he does not condone violence of any sort. But it's funny because when you ask Biden that, he answers it. And when you ask Trump the same question, he feels almost, it's what Savannah Guthrie said last night. He gets really uncomfortable. He wants to change the subject. So he'll say, well, maybe, but I'm really against the other person. So he's like, he feels like he's got to get away from it. And when I hear Joe Biden, that's not what I hear. He just says, of course, like, I don't want I don't support that. He stood with the family members of men and women killed by police with them, and he said to honor them, there shouldn't be violence. So I think he's been very clear. But let's also be clear that there is a problem of violence and the threat of violence in our country. And the intelligence and the FBI make it very clear that the far bigger threat to individual violence, to violence against groups, is coming from right-wing extremist groups. That's not a political statement. That's not a partisan statement. It's the reality, and it's what law enforcement and the FBI and others are saying. And not to be a bearer of bad news, there are a lot of those groups are in Ohio. You know, one of the meeting that took place as they were planning this horrific plot against the governor of Michigan was in Dublin, Ohio. Some of the people involved in Charlottesville were from Ohio. Some of the groups, there's a infamous website. It's in Columbus. And so this is real. And when you take a step back, you know, we should all be worried about all this violence. But the intelligence and the Homeland experts and the FBI will tell you the bigger threat right now in terms of numbers and organizations and groups comes from these white supremacist groups who have attacked again and again, and occasionally, like a case a few months ago, attacked a police officer to make it look like it was a left-wing group, but it wasn't. It was one of these right-wing groups. So that's a real concern, and I think it's something that we all need to take seriously in a bipartisan way. Not name calling, but Governor DeWine and Democrats and the Attorney General of this state and a new DOJ under Biden, this threat of white supremacist violence is real, and it's scary, and it needs to be dealt with as a serious threat. And whenever they do anything, it shouldn't be called a militia. You know, all of a sudden, if they're white, it's a militia, but if they're not white, they're terror. This is domestic terrorism. That's what that Michigan plot was, and I think it needs to be addressed in that way. And I worry that it's not being taken as seriously as it should, in some quarters at least.
President Trump says Joe Biden will ruin the economy. What do you want voters to know about Biden's economic plan? Because the president said that some of the policies that Biden had approved of and was supportive of were harmful to manufacturing workers and just everyday people. What is your response?
Yeah, my response is, you know, the records are very clear on the economy. Not just Obama, Biden versus Trump. And it's very clear from the numbers that the first 3 years of the Trump presidency before COVID ever hit were worse than the last 3 years of the Obama presidency. But it's even more stark than that. And it was actually in Toledo where Trump came early in 20, and he said Ohio had the best year it ever had in 2019. That's a complete lie. 2019 was the worst jobs year in Ohio since 2009. We lost manufacturing jobs. We lost construction jobs. Farm bankruptcies spiked. Why? Because Trump's policies, the same trickle-down policies that Republicans try every time they're in office, combined with this crazy trade war by tweet, which doesn't work, combined with ignoring issues like Lordstown, Trump's bad policies and broken promises created the worst jobs year we've seen in a decade. Biden and Obama took over after those very bad years and lifted us. So, and by the way, going back beyond, you know, that comparison, for 30 years, we've seen one side, and this gets to your policy question, one side pushes trickle-down economics, tax cuts at the top that somehow are going to magically lift everybody, and the other side says, no, everyone's got to pay their fair share, and we think a strong middle class with good jobs will lift everybody. This experiment has played out for 30 years, and what happens every time? The bottom-up strategy of lifting everybody and getting people in the middle class has always led to a better economy. And if you look at the end of the Reagan era, the Bush era, and the Trump era, the trickle-down stuff has always left the economy in bad shape that Democrats have to go fix. So, you know, but Trump's scare tactics, I don't think are working. and I think Trump's nonsense also, it's just not true. He likes to say, well, before COVID, everything was great. We got to go back to that. Before COVID, Ohio had it, even before COVID, Ohio had its worst economic year in a decade. That's a fact. And that's true in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And it just shows you the hollowness of Trump's basically tax cuts for the well-off, and just the chaos he created really made things hard for a lot of manufacturers and farmers in Ohio.
How is the Ohio Democratic Party mobilizing in the age of COVID-19?
Great question. So I think that my attitude has been it's not all or nothing. Okay. I respect that the Biden campaign has been cognizant of people's health. And so from the very beginning, they've said, and I agree with this, we're not going to get in people's faces as we campaign. That's just not safe. So no big rallies, no door knocking where you're literally a few feet from a stranger. Most people are not going to want to answer a door right now if someone's saying, hi, I'm here to talk to you about whatever, because they want to be safe. But short of those major things and headquarters where a lot of people gather, everything else you can do if you're creative, I think pretty well. You can do a lot of high visibility things at the grassroots level. You can do you can do phone banks, text banks, meetings. And so we're doing all those things, and we're talking to a lot of people. To register voters, we also did things like ask small businesses and Black-owned businesses to, if they're serving in a restaurant or if they're a barber shop, hey, have voter registration materials there for people, your customers. So even though we couldn't do your standard registration in your people's faces, we could do those things. So there have been some very creative candidates, doing drive-through events, pop-up events with registrations. There have been some county parties that have done mobile headquarters. Well, they'll go to a different parking lot on a weekend and have yard signs and everything else rather than meeting inside. So the bottom line is you can do most of what you need to do. But the one thing I would say that you have to be careful of is you need to make sure you're campaigning in a way that's accessible to everybody. And not everyone's going to join Zoom calls because of technology and other obstacles. So I think the candidates in the party, one of the things you have to do is make sure that you are still doing the grassroots things, or you will not get to people you need to get to. And I think that's one reason why we've been out there trying to be as visible as possible, knowing that because of the technological divide that breaks down along sometimes race and income lines, you need to not only think technology is going to get it all done. You've got to get out there, do a socially distant lit drop, but don't never be on the street or don't never walk near a door or you'll lose people, but do it in a way that's respectful and safe. And so we've been trying to strike that balance all the way through. And I think you're seeing already with some of the vote returns, people are getting the message, even if you're not doing the big rallies or the door knocking right in people's faces.
Ohio Democratic Party Chairman David Pepper, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Take care.